Wyoming Territory, 1883. The train whistle screamed across the empty plains just as she stepped onto the tracks. The wind caught at her skirts, snapping them around her legs as the iron beast closed in. Odessa Price didn't flinch. She stood still, arms loose at her sides, eyes locked on the horizon beyond the rail. One more step forward and it would all be over. But she never got the chance. A pair of arms caught her around the waist and yanked her back with a force that knocked the breath from her lungs. She hit the ground hard, tangled in a stranger's arms just as the train roared past, heat and metal and thunder scraping the air. "Are you out of your damn mind?" The man's voice ripped through the dust. "You don't get to leave me that easy." Odessa blinked up at him, stunned. She knew that voice. She knew those eyes. Xavier Rourke. His face was all sharp lines and sun-worn grit, but the moment she said his name, something softened in his expression. "Yeah," he said, his breath ragged. "It's me." He had been her first everything. Her first kiss under the cottonwood trees when they were 17. Her first heartbreak when he left to ride cattle down in Texas without saying goodbye. That was 7 years ago. Now she was 24, widowed and bone-tired. And Xavier was suddenly here, kneeling beside her in the dirt like a ghost dragged back from the past. Odessa scrambled up, brushing gravel from her palms. "You should not have done that. You were about to let a train kill you. I had my reasons." "I am sure you did," he said, standing. "But I am not letting you go out like that, not after all this time." She turned her back to him, blinking fast. The train had vanished down the tracks, a cloud of dust in its wake. Her heart was still pounding. "How did you even find me?" Xavier took off his hat and ran a hand through his thick black hair. "You wrote to your cousin in Cheyenne, said you were going west, he told me." "I did not write that letter for you." "No," he said, "but I read it anyway." She stared at the horizon. The land stretched out in all directions, wide and empty and silent. She had been running from everything: her dead husband, the house that never felt like home, the 2 years of grief and guilt and silence. She had not expected anyone to follow, especially not him. "What do you want, Xavier?" "I want to know why the hell you were standing on those tracks." Odessa bit her lip hard. "Because I am tired. Because he left me with nothing but debts and a name I never wanted. Because I have been alone so long I forgot what it feels like to be looked at and seen." He stepped closer. "You think I have not felt that before?" She looked at him then, really looked. His shirt was stained from the road, his boots scuffed and worn. He looked older, tougher. But his eyes were the same. "You left," she said quietly. "You never wrote, you never came back, I know," he said. "And I have hated myself for it every damn day, but I am here now, and I am not going anywhere." Odessa crossed her arms, forcing her voice steady. "You do not get to show up out of nowhere and act like you still have some kind of hold on me." Xavier stepped closer. "Then why were you still wearing that ribbon I gave you, the one around your wrist?" She looked down. She had tied the faded green ribbon under her sleeve that morning without thinking. Her voice caught. "Habit." "No," he said softly. "Hope." The silence stretched between them, long and taut. Then she turned and walked away, boots crunching over gravel. She did not look back. But Xavier followed. They stopped in a small boarding house run by a widow named Clara just outside of Rawlins. Odessa paid for a single room with the last of her money. Xavier stayed in the barn out back, on a bed of hay and saddle blankets. That first night she cried into the pillow until her throat ached. She dreamed of trains and ribbons and boys who left without saying goodbye. The second night she found him out by the fence, watching the stars. "You still ride?" she asked, arms folded over her shawl. He nodded. "Drives up from Texas through Nebraska, but I am done with that." "Why?" He glanced at her. "Because I found what I have been looking for." She looked away. I am not the girl I was, and I am not the boy who left." They stood there a long time, listening to the wind move through the grass. "You saved my life," she said finally. He turned toward her. "I would do it again." On the third day, Odessa woke to a knock on her door. Clara stood there wide-eyed. "There is a boy out front," she said. "Says he is yours." Odessa's stomach dropped. "What?" She flew down the stairs and out the front door. A boy of about 6 stood near the gate, holding a small satchel. His face was sunburned, his clothes dusty. "Ma?" he asked. Odessa dropped to her knees. "Micah!" He ran into her arms and she held him tight, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Where is your aunt?" she asked. "She said she could not take care of me anymore. Put me on a freight wagon headed west. Said to find you." Xavier was there a moment later, his hand on her shoulder. "You have a son," he said. She nodded, pressing her face to Micah's hair. "I did not know how to tell you." "You do not have to explain," Xavier said. "He is here. That is all that matters." That night, Odessa sat on the porch with Xavier while Micah slept inside. "You are good with him," she said. He shrugged. "I have always wanted a family." She leaned back against the post. "I never thought I would have one again." He reached over and took her hand. "You have one now." She looked at him, heart thudding. "I am not leaving you, Odessa, not now, not ever." Her voice wavered. "Even with everything broken in me, I will carry the pieces," he said. "If you let me." She leaned into him then, resting her head against his shoulder, and for the first time in years she felt like she could finally breathe. Odessa washed Micah's socks in the basin behind the boarding house, her fingers red from the cold water. The sun climbed slow over the plains, casting long gold light across the frost-hardened ground. She laid the socks over the fence rail to dry, then stood still a moment, breathing in the scent of horsehair, earth, and wood smoke. Behind the barn, Xavier was splitting kindling. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing the thick scar that curved along the inside of his left forearm. She remembered it now, gotten during a flood that took down a footbridge outside Lerdo. He hadn't written, but word had reached her through a trail cook 2 years after he disappeared. She hadn't wanted to believe it then. Now, seeing the mark in daylight, she felt the truth land inside her like a dropped stone. "Micah needs boots," she said once she walked over. Without pausing, Xavier asked, "What size?" "He's growing too fast for me to keep up." "I can sew and mend, but leather's another matter." "I'll talk to Clara," he said, setting the axe aside. "There's a saddler in town. I've got enough saved to see him through the winter." Odessa frowned. "I didn't ask you for money." "I didn't say you did." He reached for the next log, split it clean with one stroke. "I'm not paying for your pride. I'm helping a boy who needs dry feet." She crossed her arms, watching the rhythm of his work. "What do you plan to do now that you're here?" "I was thinking of asking around the stockyards. Rawlins has contracts running north to Montana come spring. Horses or steers, I'm not picky." "You'd stay?" she asked, quieter now. He set the axe down and looked at her. "I didn't come all this way to keep walking." That night, after Micah had fallen asleep curled beneath a quilt with his thumb hooked in the edge like he used to as a baby, Odessa sat on a crate outside the barn and stitched a patch onto the elbow of her coat. The lantern beside her hissed quietly. Xavier came out carrying a tin mug. "Coffee," she hesitated, then took it. "It's late for it. Didn't think you were sleeping much anyway." Odessa took a sip, the heat blooming in her chest. "You were right," she said. "Back at the tracks." He waited. "I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to keep going the way things were." He sat across from her, elbows on his knees. "You ever think about what you wanted before everything went wrong?" She leaned back against the barn wall. "I wanted a garden, somewhere close enough to hear the river. A house with a roof that didn't leak and a kitchen big enough to cook with someone else in it." He nodded slowly. I used to picture you with your apron dusted in flour, humming while you stirred stew. Flour costs money, she said, but her mouth curved despite herself. He laughed, low and warm. I got a good hand with fences, and I can dig a straight ditch, if you ever wanted that garden. Odessa folded the hem of her coat over her lap, smoothing the patchwork. You offering to build it, I'm offering to stay long enough to help. She looked at him, really looked. His boots were worn, but stitched solid. His hands bore calluses in the same places they used to when he carved her initials into the cottonwood bark the summer before he left. There was gray in his beard now, just a thread at the chin. I don't know how to let people back in, she said. I don't need the door flung wide, just don't bolt it. Micah stirred inside the house. She turned toward the sound, instinctive, but didn't rise. My husband never let me speak my mind. Said quiet made a woman better company. I want to hear every word you've got. Even the angry ones. She looked down into her cup. You might regret that. I won't. A coyote yipped in the distance, sharp and thin through the night. She handed the cup back to him, fingers brushing his. Micah's going to ask questions, she said. When he's ready, I'm here to answer. She stood, wrapping her coat tighter. You better get some sleep. Clara said there's a man at the livery hiring help for fence repair. You should be there early. I will. She paused at the barn door. You always wanted a family. Still do, Xavier met her gaze. I want you. And what comes with you? Her throat tightened. She nodded once and went inside. By morning, Xavier was gone to town, and Odessa found a pair of new boots left in a sack by the stove, worn in just enough to fit a growing boy. The first snow came quiet and early, brushing the prairie in white before dawn. Odessa stood at the window of her small room, watching the flakes drift down like ash. Beside the stove, Micah pulled on his new boots, tongue caught between his teeth as he worked the laces. You'll need that coat Clara offered, Odessa said, not looking away from the glass. It's too big. You'll grow into it. He didn't argue. The boy had learned early how to fit into silences. By the time they stepped out into the yard, Xavier was already there, lifting a gate post into place. His shoulders moved steady under the wool of his coat, breath fogging the cold air. He didn't speak until he'd driven the last nail and turned toward them. Clara says a neighbor's got hens gone missing. Might be a fox. I said I'd go take a look. Micah's eyes lit up. Can I come? Xavier glanced at Odessa. That's your call. She weighed the boy's face, then nodded. Be back before dark. Micah whooped and ran ahead, boots kicking up thin snow. Odessa stayed where she was, arms crossed against the chill. He's quick to trust you, she said. I don't take that lightly. She stepped closer, voice low. If you hurt him, Xavier, I won't forgive it. I won't need forgiveness. He touched her hand, just his glove brushing hers. It was enough to send warmth up her arm. That afternoon she walked to the mercantile alone, coat drawn tight, a list of cloth and pins memorized in her head. The shopkeeper, a woman named Edna with stiff white hair and a sharp tongue, eyed her carefully. Haven't seen you round much, Edna said as she wrapped the calico. You the one staying with Clara, got the boy. Odessa nodded and passed over the coins. Well, if you plan on stitching something decent, you might ask Ruth down the road. She's got a treadle machine, takes in mending for half the county. I can sew by hand. I don't doubt it. But you've got that look like someone trying to do everything alone. Odessa paused, then tucked the fabric into her satchel. Maybe I am. Edna didn't smile, but she nodded once as if that made sense to her. When she got back, the wind had picked up. She found Clara on the porch, wrapping a quilt around her shoulders. They came back an hour ago, Clara said. Boy's asleep on the rug. Xavier's fixing your gate latch. Why? Because it needed fixing. Odessa stepped inside. The room was warm, the scent of burnt sage lingering from Clara's morning sweep. Micah lay curled by the fire, his cheeks flushed from cold and excitement. Xavier was outside, his shadow moving across the frost-glazed window. She crouched beside her son, brushing hair from his forehead. "He treat you fair," Micah stirred. "He let me hold the rifle, said I had good eyes." She kissed his temple, then rose and went out into the yard. Xavier was tightening the last bolt, breath white in the fading light. He didn't turn when she approached. "What did you see out there?" she asked. "Tracks near the coop. Fox, like they thought. I built a pen wall higher, left some bait out. Micah said you let him hold a rifle. I stood behind him. He's steady, careful." She let that settle a moment, then asked, "What were you like at his age?" He straightened slowly. "Hungry. My mother died birthing my sister. Father left 2 winters after. I worked where I could. Drove oxen, hauled freight, slept in stables. You ever get tired of carrying it all alone?" "Every day," he said. "Until now." The porch light flickered behind them, Clara moving about inside. Odessa kept her hands tucked inside her sleeves. "I got offered work," Xavier said. "Not stock, building. A man needs help putting up a line of winter shelters east of town. It's steady, paid in cash." She met his eyes. "You plan to take it, if you'll let me stay close." She didn't answer right away. The wind shifted, bringing the scent of snow and burning pine. She could hear Micah breathing through the open door deep, even. "You could have kept riding," she said. "You had no reason to stop." "I had every reason," he said. She stepped forward, close enough to feel the heat of him. "I'm not ready to promise anything yet. I'm not asking you to," he said, voice low. "I just want to be where you are." She studied his face, the creases near his eyes, the way he didn't look away. "I'll mend your coat," she said quietly. "You've got a tear near the cuff. I'd like that." She nodded once, then turned back toward the house. Behind her, the wind whispered through the fence slats and the gate held fast. By late December, the snow lay thick along the fence lines and draped the low hills like cotton batting. The wind had lost its edge, but the cold now settled deep, creeping through boots and boards alike. Odessa woke early before the rooster, before the frost on the windows loosened its grip. She dressed in the dark and moved quietly, careful not to wake Micah, who had taken to curling against the wall for warmth. She found Clara in the kitchen, coaxing heat from the stove with corn cobs and pine kindling. "He's out back," Clara said before Odessa could ask. Odessa pulled her coat tight and stepped out into the yard. Xavier was mending the barn's loft ladder, hammer slow and steady. His coat bore a dusting of snow, and his breath came in faint clouds. "You'll split that rail if you drive the nail that way," she said, stepping over a patch of ice near the trough. He glanced down, lips tugging into something small and quiet. "Didn't hear you come out." "I've been up." He tested the rung before climbing down. "You sleep at all?" "Some." She paused. "Clara said you turned down the job east of town." He leaned the hammer against the wall. "The foreman started talking about hauling logs clear from Fort Washakie. Said they'd be out a week at a time, sleeping under canvas." "That's too far to be gone right now." She studied him. "You didn't mention that before." "I wasn't sure if I had a right to make that choice." "You do," she said, slower now. "I just didn't expect it. I want to be here when your boy needs sharpening his pencil or fetching water from the well. Not 2 days out in the timber." She looked down at her hands. "I've got a letter from a woman in Lander. She teaches at one of the mission schools. Said they might take me on to sew uniforms for the girls." He didn't speak, only waited. "I'd earn enough to keep us fed and we could stay through spring." "Would you want that?" "I don't know yet." She looked up. "I've never had much say in where I go." "You do now." Micah's voice called from inside, high and groggy. Odessa turned toward the house. "I'll talk to you after breakfast," she said. "I'll be here." By mid-morning, Xavier took Micah to help Clara gather kindling from her woodlot. Odessa stayed behind to finish stitching a hem for a neighbor's boy. The room was quiet, save for the scratch of thread and the groan of wind along the boards. When they returned, Micah smelled of sap and pine bark, his cheeks ruddy with cold. "He caught a rabbit in one of the old traps," Xavier said, brushing snow from his shoulders. "Didn't flinch when it kicked." Micah held up the bundle of fur with both hands. "We can cook him, can't we?" Odessa nodded. "If Mr. Rourke will clean it. I'll take care of it out back." Later, after the sun had dipped behind the ridge and Clara had gone to visit her sister, the three of them sat close to the stove with bowls of stew. The meat was lean, but the flavor was good, and Xavier had found time in Clara's pantry to add to the pot. Micah leaned against Odessa's side after supper, silent as she combed through his hair with her fingers. He'd grown quieter since coming west, though Xavier had a way of drawing him out when it counted. "You ever think about building something permanent?" she asked once the boy had gone to bed. Xavier sat across from her, boots crossed at the ankle, his hands resting on his knees. "I do, because of us. Because I'm tired of riding toward places that don't hold anything for me." She turned her cup in her hands. "I could sew in Lander. You could take carpentry jobs when they come. We could rent a cabin, maybe even buy something come spring." His voice stayed low. "Would we be there together?" She met his eyes. "If you'll have me." He stood, crossed the space between them, and knelt beside her chair. "I never stopped wanting you, even when I didn't think I deserved to come back. You left a girl," she whispered, "but I'm a woman now. I don't need saving." "I know," he said. "I just want to walk beside you." She touched his cheek, the scar near his jaw rough against her thumb. "Then we'll build something new, and we'll do it slow." He leaned into her palm. "Slow sounds just right." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of chimney smoke and frozen earth. Inside, the stove crackled and the quiet between them held steady. Odessa closed her eyes, her hand still on his face, and knew she wasn't waiting for a train anymore. She'd already arrived. The thaw came slow, but sure. By the first week of March, the snow began to pull back from the edges of the yard, revealing patches of brown grass and soggy earth beneath. The last of the ice slid from the eaves of Clara's porch with soft thuds. Odessa stood at the clothesline, hanging damp linens that smelled of lye and pine soap, her back warm from the sun for the first time in months. Micah was at the table inside, bent over a slate with a stub of chalk. Clara had taken to giving him lessons in the afternoons, and though the boy didn't speak much during them, he never missed a day. Xavier came up the path from town carrying a bundle wrapped in canvas. He looked taller somehow, though she knew he wasn't. Maybe it was the way he moved now, like he belonged to the land beneath his boots. "Got word from Lander," he said, setting the bundle on the bench. "Man named Callahan wants help building stalls behind the feed store. Says if I can drive nails true, he'll keep me busy through summer." She clipped the last sheet to the line and turned to him. "You want to take it?" "I want to take it if you're coming with me." Odessa stepped closer. "I wrote to the woman at the mission school. She says I can bring my own fabric if I want to keep my hand in things. They've got a room behind the chapel, small, but warm." He unwrapped the canvas. Inside was a worn ledger book, a length of twine, and a small wooden box, the kind used to keep tobacco or loose buttons. He opened it carefully and lifted out a narrow ring of braided horsehair and tin. "Found this in my saddlebag," he said. "Made it in Texas, years back. Don't ask me why I kept it all this time." She took it, turning it in her fingers. "You made this with your own hands." "I did." "Every twist." She looked up at him, her voice soft. "It's not gold, no," he said, "but it's strong." She slid it onto her finger. It fit inside the house. Micah's voice rose in protest, then quieted again. Odessa smiled. I told Clara we'd leave after the thaw, she said. She said she'd miss us, but not the way you eat through her bread. I'll bring her flour twice a month, he said, grinning. They packed the wagon over 4 days. Clara helped fold linens and tucked a jar of gooseberry preserves into Odessa's basket when she thought no one was looking. On the 5th morning, as the sun crested the hills and melted the last rim of frost from the porch rail, they set out. Micah sat between them, cradling a lumpy cloth satchel filled with pencils and folded paper. Odessa held the reins, and Xavier kept one hand on the back of the bench, fingers brushing hers. They reached Lander by dusk. The town was quieter than Cheyenne, but the streets were clean and the buildings stood square against the wind. They passed a schoolhouse, its windows glowing with lamplight, and a dry goods store with a painted sign swinging on rusted hooks. Callahan met them outside the feed store. He was short and broad-shouldered, with a stovepipe hat and a limp that didn't slow him much. After a brief exchange and a hard handshake, Xavier was given a key to the workshed and a promise of steady pay. The chapel stood near the edge of town, red brick with white trim. A narrow path curved around the back, leading to a door with a brass knob dulled by age. Inside, the room was plain but clean. A small stove stood in the corner, and a window looked out over a patch of soil that might one day hold rows of beans and corn. That night, they lit a lantern and spread a quilt on the floor. Micah slept near the stove, curled into his coat with a folded shawl beneath his head. Odessa sat with her back against the wall, Xavier beside her, their knees touching. "You think he'll be happy here?" she asked. "He already is. He's got you." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "And I've got you." "You do," he said, "and you always will." He kissed her then, slow and sure, nothing rushed. The kind of kiss that didn't ask for permission because it had already been given. Outside, the wind moved gently through the grass. No trains, no ghosts. Just a steady warmth building between them, quiet and real. Years passed, as they do. Xavier took over the carpentry shop when Callahan retired. He built doors that didn't stick and cradles that rocked smooth as creek water. Odessa sewed uniforms during the week and dresses on Sundays, her fingers swift and sure. The garden out back yielded carrots and onions by the second summer. Micah grew into a lanky boy with sharp eyes and a steady hand. He helped Xavier measure boards after school and learned the names of every tree that grew within a day's ride. When he turned 12, Xavier gave him his first plain blade and said, "It's not the tool that makes a man's work clean. It's the care behind it." On their porch in spring, Odessa planted peonies that bloomed red and wild. She wore the horsehair ring always, though Xavier had saved enough by their 5th year to buy her a gold one besides. She kept them both, one on each hand. They never spoke of the tracks again, not because they forgot, but because they didn't need to. Love for them wasn't loud or grand. It was a steady hand beneath hers at the ledger table. A coat hung by the door, a boy who laughed more than he used to. It was a life built slow, strong. And together, always together,